Just like us, U.S. presidents have their favorite restaurants. These are some of the most beloved dining spots of our former presidents. For Trump, a good old New York boy with the 80s paparazzi snaps to prove it, 21 Club was the spot. It started as a family tradition. Growing up, his father Fred often took the family to 21 for Sunday dinners. Donald held his first wedding reception there, the one where he married Ivana. He even had his own table, number 11, and his favorite menu item was a $36 cheeseburger. In fact, the 21 Club, a former speakeasy, played host to nearly every U.S. president since Franklin D. Roosevelt. Presidents Kennedy, Ford, and Nixon even kept personal wine collections in the restaurant's basement. One of Trump's most publicized visits to 21 Club was one of his last. He took Melania and his children there in 2016, shortly after becoming president-elect. Unfortunately, in March 2021, after prolonged closures related to renovation and the COVID-19 pandemic, the 21 Club closed for good. Barack Obama is our only president to hail from Hawaii, and his favorite restaurant, Alan Wong's in Honolulu, was uniquely Hawaiian. The restaurant fused fine dining techniques with the island's authentic ingredients and traditions. If anyone knows Hawaiian food, it's Obama. And as one of our greatest foodie presidents, we're in no position to challenge his love for Alan Wong's. During his presidency, Obama ate at Alan Wong's more than any other restaurant. According to Chef Wong, Michelle typically opted for a lighter meal, whereas the former president always went for the multi-course chef's menu. Items from the chef's menu included Wong's seafood cake, tomato with Li Hing Wei dressing, and foie gras grilled cheese with a two-color Big Island tomato soup to start, followed by lobster lasagna, ginger-crusted onaga, a ruby snapper native to Hawaiian waters, and coconut ice cream with dark chocolate and tropical fruits for dessert.
Wong says the president's favorite dish is the soy braised short ribs. Yum.
Sadly, after 25 years in business, Alan Wong's closed in 2020. It's not often that a Secret Service detail rolls into a strip mall, unless of course that strip mall is the one that's home to Peking Gourmet Inn in Falls Church, Virginia. During his presidency, George H.W. Bush dined at Peking Gourmet Inn more than any other restaurant. In fact, owner George Suey says Bush ate at his restaurant over 100 times. After his first visit in 1985, Bush wrote a letter to the owner's father to let him know the food and service were exceptional. His favorite was the combination meal with Peking duck, spicy shredded beef, lamb chops, and jumbo shrimp. It became known as the Bush Standard Menu.
Not only we lost a great president, also look like lost a good friend.
Richard Nixon didn't feel comfortable in a lot of places, but he could loosen up at Trader Vic's. The Polynesian tiki-style restaurant and bar served countless politicians over the years. Nixon first dined there with his family on Valentine's Day 1973, when he was already hiding the secret that would end his presidency. From then on, when he felt he had no one to turn to, Nixon would jump in the presidential limo and head to Trader Vic's for late-night drinks. The Secret Service would alert the restaurant that the POTUS was on his way so they could clear out customers. Over a couple of Navy grogs, Nixon would pour out his heart, and the bartender would listen. Cooper's Pit Barbecue in Llano, Texas, specializes in smothered ribs, brisket, and chops fit for even the most discerning cowboy. Cooper's opened as a stand in Mason, Texas in 1953, and a couple former presidents from the Lone Star State have feasted on what Cooper's was serving up. In the 1960s, President Lyndon Johnson rolled up to Cooper's in his Lincoln, hungry for some coal-fired barbecue. And when George W. Bush won the 2000 presidential election, he had Cooper's cater his party at Crawford Ranch. In addition to the one in Llano, there are Cooper's locations in Austin, College Station, Fort Worth, and New Braunfels. Dwight D. Eisenhower likely discovered his love for Chinese-American fare while serving in the military, where chop suey was a popular mess hall dish. As an Army major stationed in Washington, D.C., he fell in love with a spot on Columbia Road called Sun Chop Suey. Eisenhower was a regular, often coming in to eat with his wife Mamie and their young son. His favorite dish was the chicken chop suey, and he didn't deviate from it. In fact, the only reason Eisenhower deviated from sun chop suey at all was to fight in World War II. Even while he was in the White House, Eisenhower stayed loyal to sun chop suey. The FBI knew how much he loved the food there, so they took the liberty of investigating all of the restaurant's employees. No harm ever came to President Eisenhower at his beloved restaurant. President Kennedy's affinity for Union Oyster House has become the stuff of legends. While representing Massachusetts in the House and later the Senate, Kennedy made a habit of popping into Union Oyster House on weekend afternoons. The owners always gave him his favorite booth on the second floor, where he could read the newspaper and feast on lobster stew in private. A plaque designating it the Kennedy booth hangs there in his memory. Kennedy wasn't the only president to eat there. Calvin Coolidge, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama all visited the legendary seafood restaurant.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get 10 Chadas to go. 10 Chadas to go. We're going to eat them on Air Force One.
Union Oyster House was established in 1826 and is one of the nation's oldest continually operating restaurants. But be warned, sightings of Kennedy's ghost have been reported in the dining room and the bathrooms of the venerable restaurant. After heading to the polls on Election Day 1884, Grover Cleveland had breakfast at one of his favorite local eateries, Gerot's French restaurant in Buffalo, New York. Gerot's has been demolished, but it used to be on the corner of Swan and Washington Streets. The restaurant signage boasted poultry, game, and oysters, and in August 1884, it advertised a lunch counter that sold sandwiches, salads, and cold cuts in the afternoon to accommodate businessmen in the area, men like Cleveland. Before assuming the presidency, he served as mayor of Buffalo and governor of New York. Cleveland's fondness for restaurants had a lot to do with him being one of our first urbanite presidents. In his lawyer days, he worked and lived in downtown Buffalo, staying in an apartment building and frequenting nearby restaurants rather than cook at home. Gerot's French restaurant was one of the premier places Cleveland went to satisfy his robust appetite. Founding father and third president Thomas Jefferson was a man of refined and at times extravagant tastes. When he served as an American diplomat to France in the 1780s, Jefferson took to the Parisian food scene like a duck to water. Sampling fine French wines and tasting the nouvelle cuisine that was developing in France at the time turned Jefferson into a Francophile. Among the many places he visited was Champ d'Oiseau. The restaurant opened in 1765 in Rue des Poulies, or what is now known as Rue du Louvre. It wasn't a fancy place. It specialized in dishes meant to restore and replenish their diners. Champ d'Oiseau served items like eggs, pasta, and semolina cakes. Its signature dish was poultry with chicken sauce. Jefferson brought his love affair with French gastronomy back home. That and 680 bottles of wine. He installed a stove in his Monticello kitchen like the ones he'd seen in France. He had olive oil, mustard, cheese, anchovies, and a pasta maker shipped from overseas and sent his enslaved cook, James Hemmings, to apprentice under French chefs in order to finesse his culinary skills. Jefferson's White House dinners were steeped in French influence and included the finest French wines. He did have quite the collection after all. If it's a historic tavern on the East Coast, George Washington has probably been there. Philadelphia's City Tavern was one of Washington's go-to places. It opened in 1773 and was a popular meeting spot for America's earliest politicians, who headed in to talk business before and after congressional sessions. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Philly's native son Benjamin Franklin all ate and drank at City Tavern, which closed in 2021. One night in 1787, City Tavern hosted a party for soon-to-be President Washington, and the Founding Fathers really let their wigs down. The bar tab for the event, which was attended by Washington and 54 guests, still exists, and it's no joke. The men drank 54 bottles of Madeira, 60 bottles of claret, 8 bottles of whiskey, 8 bottles of cider, 12 bottles of beer, and 7 bowls of alcoholic punch. Dinner was also served that night, but the bar tab alone totaled 89 pounds, 4 shillings, and 2 pence. That would be around $15,400 in today's currency. George Washington was all about the tavern life, and not just with his soldier friends. He dined out with his wife Martha, too. Gadsby's Tavern in his hometown of Alexandria, Virginia was a favorite. English-born John Gadsby operated the tavern and hotel beginning in the late 1700s. It was a hive of activity centered around Alexandria's port-based economy, and the establishment relied on a workforce of enslaved people to keep its hospitality at a high standard. The 5 presidents who succeeded Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and Quincy Adams, also dined at Gadsby's. Gadsby's biggest night of the year was its annual birth night ball, thrown in February in honor of Washington's birthday. Since Washington was busy being president when the tradition began, he didn't actually attend until 1798 and again in 1799, 10 months before his death. The Dress to Impress event was filled with food, late-night dancing, and a sizable guest list. Historical accounts suggest that Washington killed on the dance floor. Today, Gadsby's is a museum and a registered National Historic Landmark. The museum offers guided tours, and you can stay for a meal at the colonial-inspired Gadsby's Tavern restaurant. The museum still hosts a birth night ball every February, and it's a hot ticket event. You won't hear the pounding of horse hooves outside Fraunces Tavern anymore, but you can step back in time if you drop by for a visit. The historic institution, which still stands in Lower Manhattan, was built in 1719, before America even existed, and it set the scene for some epic Revolutionary-era moments. In 1774, the Sons of Liberty, an angsty secret society of colonists that included future President John Adams, Founding Father Samuel Adams, and Midnight Rider Paul Revere, plotted the New York Tea Party at Fraunces Tavern. A year later, a British warship sent an 18-pound cannonball through the tavern's roof. The tavern was owned by Samuel Fraunces, who bought the building in 1762 and originally operated under the name Queen's Head Tavern.
He had 2 kitchens. He had a savory kitchen and a sweet kitchen, which is very uncommon of the time.
During the British occupation of New York in the mid-1770s, Fraunces was forced to cook for British generals who enjoyed the tavern's hospitality, no matter how strained. When British troops finally evacuated in November 1783, Governor George Clinton marked the occasion with a soiree at Fraunces Tavern. During the festivities, George Washington bid farewell to his fellow officers in a speech that brought war-hardened soldiers to tears. Today, the building is part tavern, part museum.